speaking to you today from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 24. Again, we must always keep in mind the context. Why is Jesus saying the things he's saying in Matthew 24? You know, this is a great help in reading many passages of the Bible that are difficult. If you will keep in mind the circumstances and keep in mind why he is saying what he's saying and who is it that he's talking to, it will help you understand what the real import and the real meaning of what's being said is. The context is Jesus has for the last time confronted the scribes and the Pharisees and has pronounced judgment upon them as the rulers of Israel, the rulers of the Jews in his generation. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 23, he said that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. Now he didn't mean some other generation, he meant those people living there. And the disciples then come to him later and said, you know, Jesus, do you understand what you're talking about? Look at the beautiful buildings of the temple. And he said, don't you see, this is in Matthew 24, verse 3. He said, verse 2, I'm sorry. There shall not be left one stone upon another, and everything shall be thrown down. And then they came to him and said privately, tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? Now, there's many things that throw us off in this passage. One of those things is this phrase, the end of the world. We misread that, and we jump to conclusions and think he means the end of planet Earth. But the word world there is the Greek word aeon, which means the age. The age that was coming to a close is not the age in which we live, but it was the age in which they lived. They lived in an age of the law of Moses, which was symbolized by the temple, which they are discussing here. You notice that they say, when shall these things be? These things meaning when every stone will be thrown down of the Jewish temple. That's the key thought. When will that be? Now we can look back and we can say when it was, but for them it was still future. But notice they also say, what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? Now we have not yet talked about this idea, what shall be the sign of thy coming. Did you know that the disciples of Jesus in his day did not have a developed idea of the second coming of Christ like we have today? When we read that, we read the coming, what shall be the sign of thy coming, and it automatically sparks all kinds of other associations for us. But for them, they didn't have all those other associations. They didn't have anything in the New Testament. They didn't have a New Testament. They didn't have any idea of the second coming of Christ. And may I say, this will shock you because we're so used to hearing that. That phrase is not scriptural. You can't find that in the New Testament where it talks about a second coming. Now the reason I bring that up is to you, his coming is described, the coming of the Lord is used, just said in that way, the coming of the Lord. There's no second to it. The point is, whenever he comes is his coming. His coming is broader than just a single thing. And now there is a sense in which his coming has to do with what took place in 70 A.D. Let me show it to you. It's in Matthew's Gospel. Let's turn backwards a couple of pages. See, this was fresh in their minds when they said, what shall be the sign of thy coming? What did they mean by that? What did they mean, thy coming? Well, just a few pages before, in Matthew chapter 21, Jesus gave a parable to the scribes and the Pharisees. And he said, this is Matthew chapter 21, verse 33. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard and hedged it round about and digged a winepress in it and built a tower, let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country. And when the time of the fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the husbandmen that they may receive the fruits of it. And the husbandman took his servants and beat one, killed another, stoned another. Again he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did unto them likewise. Last of all, this is a key thought, last of all he sent to them his son, saying, they will reverence my son. But when the husbandmen saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir, come let us kill him and seize upon his inheritance. And then they caught him and cast him out of the vineyard and slew him. Now, we know from the events that subsequently took place in reading our Bibles, we know what that's talking about. We know then what the time frame of this parable. We know that the vineyard now is Israel and that the owner is God and that he sent messengers and they killed some and they stoned others. And it says, last of all. You see, last of all meaning what? Last of all in his final dealings with the nation of Israel. Last of all in his dealings with them. See, he's sent Jesus as the last chance. Last of all, and after that, well, what is after that? Last of all, he sent the Son. And they took him and they killed him. They threw him out of the vineyard. Jesus is predicting that. Notice what it says next. Verse 40. When the Lord, therefore, of the vineyard cometh, what will he do to those husbandmen? When he used this phrase, when the Lord of the vineyard cometh, He means when He comes to reckon with them, when He comes to settle accounts, when He comes to finally settle the issue with these husbandmen. The word cometh there is what the disciples had in mind when they said, "What shall be the sign of thy coming?" Well, here's what they said. They said to Him, "He will miserably destroy those wicked men and will let out the vineyard to other husbandmen, which shall render Him the fruits in their seasons." That's correct. The coming He's talking about is not something that we imagine in our future, but it's something that they had to look forward to. We might say, I say that a little bit sarcastically, but that thing that was coming, certainly to come, as an event subsequent to the taking of Jesus by the Jewish leaders and throwing Him out of the city to a hill called Golgotha and crucifying Him. It says, what will the Lord of the vineyard do when He comes? Well, He's coming to settle accounts with those people who killed all the prophets and stoned other ones, and then they took the Son, Jesus, and they crucified Him. That's the coming that Jesus has in mind. Now go back to Matthew 24, and let's see when He finally addresses their question. He has talked about the temple being destroyed. He has talked about the armies of Jerusalem surrounding the city. And He says, when you see that, flee from the city and go out into the country. He says, verse 27, "For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth unto the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be." Now when He says coming there, He's referring back to what He just got through saying in the parable of the vineyard. What will the owner of the vineyard do when He comes? Well, He is coming. What's He coming for? Well, He's coming to settle accounts. And He says, what does He mean when Jesus uses this prophetic language, when Jesus uses this symbolic language of the Old Testament prophets and also of the New Testament book of Revelation? As the lightning comes out of the east and shines to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Does He mean literal lightning? No, He means something that's unmistakable. Nobody's going to miss it. It's not going to be a small thing. It's going to be a big thing. Nobody's going to miss this. See, this is poetic or prophetic or metaphorical language to say that it is a dramatic event, a big event, and it's not going to go secret. Everybody's going to see it. It's going to be out in the open, and everybody's going to know. The next verse says, "For wherever the carcass is, there will the eagles gather together." The carcass means the dead body. Wherever the dead thing is, that's where the eagles are going to gather together. Now, the dead thing and the carcass is the nation of Israel, which is being judged, which the armies are coming to destroy. It's interesting that the insignia of the Romans is the eagle. But Jesus is just saying here that nobody's going to miss this event. This is going to be unmistakable. And He says, just like when there's a dead body laying out in the field, you see the birds of prey, the vultures circling around, that you're going to see Israel like that dead carcass and the birds of prey, the Roman army circling around. It's going to be unmistakable. Nobody's going to miss it. He says, verse 29, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken." Sometimes when people read this, they take this all deadly literally and think that the literal sun in the sky is going to be darkened. And the literal, what did it say? "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, the stars of heaven shall fall." I just must say this, that He is speaking as a prophet, speaking prophetically. If you read the Old Testament, go and read, I challenge you, go and read Isaiah. You'll find this exact same language. And in Isaiah chapter 60, even in the book of Acts, we read this language about the sun being darkened and the moon being turned into blood. It's prophetic language. And just briefly, if I have a moment here, I'll try to explain it to you. You remember clear back in the Old Testament. Let me just read it to you really quick, if I got time. Genesis chapter 37. Joseph was born to a father whose name was Jacob, but later changed to Israel. He had brethren whose names, who became the progenitors of the nation, of the tribes of Israel. And Joseph dreamed a dream. In verse 9 he says, "I have dreamed another dream." And he told his brethren, "Behold, I have dreamed one dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me." And he told his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come and bow down ourselves to the earth?" In this passage we see clearly that the sun and the moon and the stars represented in a symbolic way Israel and his wife and the 12 tribes of Israel. And when Jesus said the sun will be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, He didn't mean the sun in the sky and the moon in the sky. He meant Israel is going to be, the light's going to be put out. It's the end of the road for the nation of Israel.